Hi everyone, Michelle Ferreri here, Member of Parliament, and another episode of People Before Politics. Thank you so much to everyone who's been watching these episodes. If you're new and this is your first episode, there's quite a few more. You can get them on all streaming devices where you can listen. If you don't want to watch the video, you can also watch it here on Facebook or YouTube or on my website as well. So the premise again behind this show and this series is to really find out who the person is behind the politics, what shaped them, what are their life experiences, and to really show people at home that elected officials, politicians are not just robotic. We are actually humans with human experiences, and to paint that picture and for you guys to get a better sense, I think often too, in particular, of conservative values, who we are, and sort of undo a lot of the stereotypes and myths that are out there. So today, this is exciting. They're always exciting. You guys hear me say this every week, but this one's really exciting because I call this guest my parliamentary brother. I kind of have two of them. He's one of them, and he's my neighbor in my riding. So welcome to Philip Lawrence, MP for Peterborough South.
Thank you very much.
It's, right?
Yes.
Did I forget Northumberland
It's
in
Northumberland, Peterborough South.
Oh, I just had a blank because I just wanted you to be with Peterborough with me there. But this is actually what happens in the House. The Speaker will say Northumberland, Peterborough South, and all I do if I'm working away and I hear Peterborough and I go, oh my gosh, am I supposed to be speaking? But it's actually Philip. It's actually Philip. So Philip Lawrence, yep. Northumberland, Peterborough South. So your riding covers Port Hope, Coburg,
Brighton, Campbellford, Norwood, Keene, Orono, Newcastle, Lacramie, and all parts in between there.
Yeah. You have a lot of my family.
We do. I'm reasonably confident they vote for me, but
they're good. Even though my mom tried to put up my sign during
she did,
and
actually.
I was like, Mom, you can't vote for me. You have to vote for Philip. So
it actually caused mass confusion because people on that street, I know because I door knocked that street, and they're like, oh, I thought we voted for Michelle in this riding. No, you vote for Philip. Just look for the Conservative was at the end of the day.
We look the same. It's fine. No, Philip was one of the very first people that I phoned when I decided to run, and he was just really honest with me. He gave me really great advice. And Philip, I think what people don't know about you, and maybe I'm overstepping here, but you're kind of a self-proclaimed introvert. Would you say that?
Yeah, that's fair. No, you're not overstepping at all. Yeah.
So I think, sometimes he's under, what's the word I want to say? Like, people don't know how smart you are, which is true in a lot of introverts, right? Because you kind of sit back, you're an observer. And Philip is like one of the go-to, especially when it comes to like income tax, finance. Your life before politics, before you were elected, you were a lawyer?
Yeah, and I practiced law for a couple of years and worked for a decade for a major Canadian financial institution. And and Michelle, if you wouldn't mind just staring right at the camera here and address JT and Maggie, my children, for those of you who don't know, and just tell them how smart I am, because the 7 and 9-year-old, sometimes they agree, sometimes
you want me to tell your
not
wife,
so
Natasha.
much. Yeah, well, I was going to go there, but...
Your children are beautiful. Your wife is amazing. You have a beautiful family. I'm going to read a little bit of your bio. We're going to talk a little bit about your life too. But Philip and his wife Natasha live on a small farm. It's gorgeous near Orono, Ontario, where they are currently raising their 2 children, Margaret or Maggie and James. But do you call him J? I
call him JT. Yeah,
JT.
Yeah.
What's the T?
So the little bit of the story here, because it is people before politics, is my father and my wife's father both died before James was born, and so it was James and Terry actually. So so Terry would have been his grandfather, I guess. My wife's dad. So yeah.
That's really nice.
Yeah.
I hear you say JT all the time. I love James, by the way. James is my favorite. I saw him one day on the street with Philip, and I'm like, are you enjoying being here in Ottawa and coming to question period? It's boring. It was like, I really admire your honesty. Thank you, James. But he's actually a political whiz, too. That kid is brilliant. Prior to representing Northumberland, Peterborough South, Philip obtained his law degree from Osgoode Hall Law School and his MBA from the
Schulich School.
Schulich School of Business.
York University is the Schulich School of Business.
I didn't know. Okay.
Yeah.
He practiced tax law before entering financial services, where he spent 10 plus years. I'm gonna go into a lot of this, but I want to get it out because I want people to know what he's accomplished, and then I'm going to talk to him about a few other things. But working hard for you, first elected in 2019, Philip is your member of parliament. We just said that. He is currently serving as a shadow minister for Federal Economic Development Agency
That's
for
out of date,
Eastern. It is out of date?
That's out of date. So
yeah, I'm like, this
so
is
yeah.
all...
So in 2019, my apologies,
Let's just
Michelle.
scrap this whole
I
interview.
provided you bad information. So 2019, I'm elected for the first time for any political office. I think like yourself, right? Like you, and initially just served in the backbench, as it were, and then. Although I was on Justice Committee, which was great, then went on to be the Shadow Minister for National Revenue, and then when we got shuffled, then to Economic Development, and now I am the Associate Shadow Minister for Finance, brackets tax reform. I refer to myself as the tax guy. So, yeah.
Which is why I go to him for all of these questions, which is he's so quick and knowledgeable. But you did do FedDev under Aaron's leadership,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
That was your shadow minister role
that
over
was
there.
that was really interesting, and sort of seeing how that works. You got to see some opportunities where the federal government could work well in small communities and filling in gaps. There are we don't have to go into too much detail here, but there are challenges with that as well in terms of the administration and the management of it. Not at a local level. Had some great interactions with the local Peterborough. The federal development. For those of you who don't know, they're community-based sort of funding organizations that are supported by the federal government, and they'll be able to support small businesses that maybe can't achieve financing through traditional means. The local people are great, but some of the administration, as is the case with a lot of these Liberal government programs, have some challenges. But yeah,
That was a polite. Philip's really great at politely correcting things. I think that's great. And but you have a fire to you too that I've seen. So I want to back up. I want to go back into sort of young little Philip, who I can just imagine is just the cutest little kid. Too bad we didn't have like this rolling video to show you. But so what kind of house did you grow up? What did your parents do? Brothers and sisters?
Yeah, so I've got one sister, Jessica. We grew up actually on a small horse boarding farm. My dad worked in insurance and managed an office down there, a branch manager down, originally grew up in Niagara. And my mother is a teacher. She was actually, a little point of trivia, is she was actually the president of the union for supply teachers back there. So I come from a strong union background, and my mother being a president of a teachers union. Yeah, exactly. But she was also a diehard conservative, which you don't...
That's a unicorn.
Yeah, it really is. I didn't really recognize how unusual she was in that respect until later in life. But and actually, the first time I really recognized I mentioned that at a debate, and I saw several people who I knew were teachers almost sit back, like, oh my goodness, right? Like a union leader of teachers and a conservative, right? So, but she strongly believed, as I do, in education, but also strongly believed in freedom and individual liberty, right? So, yeah.
Critical thinking.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
So when do you think politics sort of started to take, like when did you start to get interested, or why did you get interested?
Yeah, so this is where I have to give you another confession here, Michelle.
Oh, I love confessions. Juicy details, folks.
I was, well, I'm sure cool children like yourself were out.
I don't think any of us on the Hill here were cool children. Let's just call a spade a spade.
We're out at the movies and parties and stuff like that. I just absolutely fell in love with politics, like from like 11 or 12 is probably the earliest memories I have of starting to get interested in following politics, and it just I don't know, it spoke to me from a young age, right? So it's a little bit embarrassing.
That's not embarrassing, but that's exactly when they start teaching it to you in school, right?
Yeah.
Usually. So that is on par, I would say.
Yeah.
And Michael Cooper, who was our guest last week, said the same thing. But I do remember learning like about it, how it all worked, and the order and the structure, and
Yeah.
So I do think that. But why do you think you were drawn to it?
I think part of it, if I'm going to do a little bit of a psychological analysis myself here, is I'm naturally a contrarian, and I think a lot of politicians are. I even though I was a very good student and I think a pretty good kid in following the rules, I have this contrarian streak to me that I would get frustrated that when rules were not being applied what I viewed as appropriately. Like, I wouldn't necessarily voice these. Like, I was a very sort of calm teenager and kid and all that good stuff. But this was my way of sort of vocalizing that. Like, and the ultimate authority, of course, is government, right? And then, like I said, I'm also a bit of a history nerd. So you get into that and you look, over the last 100 years, a large amount of the worst atrocities, the worst things done, the condemning of the human condition have come from governments. And so when I saw that, and I also saw the rest of society, I think it's fair to say, is sort of pushed to the left and more and more and more government control. The contrarian in me sort of pushed back against that. And when you actually look at the evidence, it's often government that's the root cause. So, I mean, to be a little bit, controversial here, if you look at the residential schools, certainly the Catholic Church had a role in that, but the federal government had a huge role in that. It's true. It is the federal government that conspired to take children away from Indigenous parents and move them away and to steal them from their roots, from their history, from who they were. And so when I look across for 100 years, like whether it be the Soviet Union, of course, Nazi Germany, it's government. And so, like I said, just looking at the facts and the contrarian nature of me says, well, why are so many people looking to the government when often government is actually the very root of these issues?
That's a lot.
It's a little deep.
No, I love it though. That's why I love talking to Philip, because we actually usually have a lot of the Conservatives are like this, but I feel like we don't have a lot of surface conversation. We have really sort of deep philosophical conversations, because I think you're exactly right, and I think it's not just government, it's the wrong person in leadership who doesn't have character and integrity to know how to balance power.
Right, and I think you said the exact right words there. It's the balance of power. Like it's trite to say, but power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And to bring it back to sort of modern day, we have seen this. Like in the past 8 years, we had a government, Liberal Party coming in, promising open by default, sunny ways, and all this language. And quite frankly, what we've seen is scandal after scandal after scandal, and it just seems like Prime Minister Trudeau is just trying to get a tighter and tighter grip, whether we look at C11 and the potential giving government at least partial control over the internet, or we look at even the firearms, trying to ban long guns with the amendment to C21. It's just more and more control, and like the government does great things. There are great things that the government can do. The government is responsible for protecting us. They're responsible for putting the roads in place, and government can do great things. The challenge is any institution, any body, any human being who is given unfettered power rarely goes well for the other people around them, right? So,
and hence the really important role of opposition.
Right.
So when we're in government, same thing, right? You need somebody that's sort of pushing. I think what drives me crazy, and Philip is so good. Like, so when we have house duty, that means we're all in the house and you can kind of go and shift. That's why sometimes you see people in different seats. We can kind of get up and go and chat. And sometimes, you'll go over and I'll have these like really deep questions for Philip. I'm like, do you not find this place sometimes really frustrating, like nothing happens? And Philip always has these really insightful answers. And the thing you said to me one time, and I don't even know if you remember it, you said, Michelle, we've tried all different approaches, and if you look around the world, even as slow and as clunky as our government is, it's the best one we have in place. And I think too, like, it's a catch-22, because it's slow and clunky, but that also can protect you from somebody who is abusing power if you have you have the safeguards in place.
Absolutely, Michelle, and thank you for that. It always gives me a little bit of nervousness when someone quotes me back to me, but
I didn't quote you verbatim. It was in a roundabout way.
And I have to, because every politician has to quote Winston Churchill at least once in every interview. Like, he's the one who, I believe, and I'll loosely paraphrase, that this is the best worst system, right? So, and you talked about balance earlier, and you're absolutely right. As Edmund Burke talked about famously, like, the chances are new ideas are not going to be successful. There'll be some new ideas that are great, but that's why we need to vet them. Like, the chances are that we're going to do more damage than good when we put in the legislation. That's just what objectively what a review of history would say, right? And it's a very slow and sort of painful march along to a better path. And so we should approach any new legislation, any new idea with skepticism, because it might be great and it might help us move along that path to having a more equal, more inclusive, more prosperous country. But they said the odds are that this is not going to improve things. It's actually going to make it worse. And so that's why we need to approach everything with skepticism. That's why it's so important to have a strong opposition, right? Like, even when we're in government, it's my honest hope that whichever party forms opposition is strong, efficient, and effective.
Totally.
Because that makes our job easier. They're gonna find issues, because no one's perfect. No government's ever gonna have all the solutions, and they're gonna push different things and hopefully open our eyes to perhaps things we were blind to, right? So, and we'll continue to do that. And I make no apologies, and I'll tell folks that I hate when politics get personal, and so I will avoid that like plague. And so, but when it comes to sort of rattling things around in the battlefield of ideas, I'm going to be extremely aggressive, because even if my idea doesn't win, hopefully I can improve that other person's idea.
It's funny to see Philip aggressive, because he's kind of this really rational, soft person. Like, you really have a really approachable kind. Like, you're always saying nice things to everybody. You're always very complimentary. So when you see the fire in your belly, when you get, like, in your committee, or when you're really rattling those cages, it's like, wow, Philip, that must be serious. So I want to talk about this, because I do, unfortunately, we don't have as much time as normal, because I got to get to question period prep when you're watching this, if you're watching it live. But the things that you've done in the House, like, I feel like you really, I don't know, like, what happened to you to have this, like, it feels like you really want to fight for human rights is one of your
Yep.
private members bill, but you've done a lot here. Like, you help with farmers, and today being Canadian Agricultural Day, do you want to talk on those two bills?
Yeah, so I mean, I really do, every time I walk into the chamber, feel honored to be there. It is a very special place. Very few people have had the honor, and every time I walk in there, we represent the 100,000 odd people plus the 37 million across Canada, and it's such an incredible honor and a responsibility, right? And so I try to make every moment matter. And so we had one private member's bill that sought to provide relief to farmers on the carbon tax, and we almost got that across the line, and then the Prime Minister Trudeau called the unnecessary election. But the good news is Ben Lobb, our colleague, has carried the mantle forward, and I think he will get it across there, so giving some much needed relief to the farmers. Now, I will say that the Liberals did actually, when my PMB said, they out of the gate, you'll never believe this, but they were hypocrites. They said, this is a terrible bill, this is an awful bill. Then they put it in their budget, but they only did it halfway. And so instead of just giving an exemption to the farmers with certain respects to carbon tax, they made it a rebate. So the money would have to go to Ottawa and then come back to the farmers, because the Liberals love control. And so we had that. I also had a private member's bill, which I sponsored from the Senate, which was on charitable law. Once again, you'll be shocked by this, Michelle, but underneath this Liberal government, they constrained charities trying to do work across the globe, these great Canadian charities, with red tape, and it actually made it very difficult for them to do work. So as simple as imagine a Canadian charity wanted to provide water to refugees struggling in Haiti, right?
Right.
Like they would have, in order for the charity to give a gift to that, to donate to them.
Can we use the earthquake as an example right now?
Exactly, yeah. So underneath, exactly. So let's say that let's say that there's a charitable organization that doesn't have status in Canada, in Turkey, and say that there is an organization here that says, hey, we want to give this organization, we know them, they've got a great name, we want to give them $100,000 to provide relief. They have to provide reams and stacks of information. In addition to that, that charity has to demonstrate to CRA that they have control over the Turkish charity. You can imagine, especially in international context, or even perhaps even worse is in the indigenous context. So a non-indigenous charity that wants to give gift to to an indigenous charity has to show that they have direction and control over them. You can imagine in the colonial context what that means, right? It's absolutely brutal and archaic. And so the Liberals actually, we sponsored that private members bill, and the Liberals put that into the budget. But once again, they didn't do it right, and we're currently fighting them right now because we had like a red tape reduction. They said, we'll put it in the budget, we'll do that, we'll reduce the red tape. And they came out with guidance adding more red tape. And it was just, it's absolutely nuts. And then finally, we've got the private members bill in place on international human rights. And so there's a number of facets to it. A lot of it has to do with helping people who are prisoners of conscience and holding accountable those who are the worst human rights violators. I really sort of hopefully the theme of my political career, or the root of it all, will be, you know, whether you're trying to do good in Canada, in Turkey, or whether you're a farmer in Peterborough, that I'm making it easier for you to do good things, that we as government are pulling off the shackles so that Canadians can be the best they possibly can.
That's a great legacy to leave. And then I think we could go down the rabbit hole of what each person defines as good, because based on their perception, right? This is the philosophical debate where many of the Liberals will say, I think I'm doing the exact right thing by telling you what to do and how to do it and how to manage your money. Like, they believe that.
Right.
And so anyway, like. Yeah,
and getting back to when I was 12 years old, I think I gave a speech. I can't remember what class it was.
Please recite it now.
Grade 7 or grade 8, and basically the speech was that we have a decision to make. Do we believe in Canadians? Do we believe in your sister, your brother, your mother to make the right decisions, or do we believe that some bureaucrat in Ottawa should make that decision for you? And Conservatives.
You said that when you were 12?
Yeah, I did. I did not win, surprisingly, with a panel of teachers. I did not win that particular speech contest. Although I still hold a bit of grudge. I think I should have won, but just like the Campbellford pie contest, I should have won that too. But what?
I see that you've let it go,
yeah,
so that's great. I see that you've let that go. If you could find that 12-year-old Philip Lawrence speech and say it in the House of Commons or do a Facebook video, I can really get behind that, Philip. I love your tenacity to sort of fight for equality, fight for everyone, right? Which is, again, this kind of conservative. It's funny, you see all these common threads pulled out in everyone I interview, and I'm like, I never knew myself like how conservative I really was till every day I'm in here, and I'm like, that's what I believe in all the things that you've said, like how to, you've got to trust people, you've got to give them the tools to be successful, and you've got to trust them, right? It's management 101.
And that's why you're so important to our movement, Michelle, if I can, because you're a great communicator. And the reality is, like, I can talk about the intricacies of tax law, or why we should look at capital gains tax, or whatever boring thing I'd like to talk about. But the reality is that most people, I would even say, I don't think that's too strong, most people are conservative in their values. It's just we as conservatives don't always do a great job. We explain the how. We don't always do a great job of explaining the why, and that's where you're super talented, Michelle, and so important to our movement. So. Oh,
well, that was really nice. I'll give you the $20 later for saying that. Thanks so much. No, I think it comes down to pragmatic and fair. Like, it's like, is that fair? Like, I think that's really the undercurrent. Okay, so I'm way past. I'm going to get in trouble, by the way, for being late. So 5 quick questions. Favorite food?
Favorite food? Steak.
Medium, rare, well done.
Practically mooing, yeah. So rare.
Oh, you like it when it's bloody.
Yeah.
Okay. Favorite book?
Favorite book? Jeepers creepers. I should be able to answer this quicker.
These are the questions that threw Michael Cooper
Yeah,
for a complete
I know. Let's.
This is a pass or fail.
I'm not sure this
exercise
is
too.
a great answer, but it's the first one that comes to mind. So it's A Brave New World.
Okay. And what do you love most about this job?
I love standing up for my principles and values every day.
What do you like the least about this job?
The conflict. Although I'm a happy warrior and I'll do it. It takes it out of you, right? So I've certainly seen other politicians talk about that. But when you get into one of those conflicts in the House, especially when it slides a little bit towards the personal, like it's honestly a day or two before I feel right, and get myself back in the game there. So.
Philip Lawrence, Member of Parliament, Northumberland, Peterborough South, and just all around great guy, and just been very helpful. And thanks, Philip. Keep at it. You know what? The income tax. This guy knows it. He knows how to fix our finances. You care about monetary policy.
I do care. I do, and I actually think about it as well, which is
you.
equally as important.
That's great. And on that note, thank you guys so much for watching this episode of People Before Politics. I should actually also add, I'm so sorry, Philip, where can people find you and follow you on your social media?
Just put in Philip Lawrence MP and you'll find me.
1 L.
Yeah.
Not
exactly.
2 L's. And, thanks for watching. You can stream on all platforms that stream. Hope you're listening. Hope you're watching. Hope to see you again. Thanks for joining. We love to hear your comments. We love to hear your feedback. Thanks so much for watching this episode of People Before Politics.